As information was given to us about how all the robots work, we still had no confirmation her core was destroyed, so there was no reason to assume she was dead. There's a complete difference when it comes to something like a person, where it's like, okay, yeah, a person with a giant chunk of their side missing, bleeding out on the floor can easily be assumed dead. But we know that these are machines, and their core is essentially like their heart. So as long as that is still intact, they can be brought back. So I didn't think that Witch was going to end up being dead unless we had something like that confirmed. What I will say is I'm definitely alright with her living. I'm not one of those guys who thinks that like a character has to die in order for like certain aspects of the story to kind of, be presented as like serious or whatnot. I mean, we're looking at a dire situation where if they fail, all the robots in the cosmos are going to be destroyed anyway from the All Link, which is completely different than say like, oh yeah, we're just causing an explosion. It's like, no, they're essentially doing a kill switch on all the robots and all the machines in the entire cosmos. So everything going on right now, I still think is pretty interesting. Lots of crazy stuff going on, lots of moving parts. Like, what's funny is, like, in this chapter, proved one thing about, like, a complaint I've had recently. Again, it's not a big complaint. It's nothing that it's like, oh, it's ruined the arc for me. It has toned it down a little bit, but not in a way that can ultimately really damage much of my my major feedback of the arc. And that was the fight with Laguna versus Ijuna. Well, Laguna was able to beat her without just going into Overdrive, and I liked Overdrive designs, but I didn't like how many we got so quickly. The two that I was definite, like, for sure, like, okay, these guys have to have Overdrive. Well, I figured Jin would definitely have Overdrive for sure. Homura, I was kind of on the fence. I was like, she could have the pseudo, kind of like that spot right between a normal ether gear and Overdrive where the ether lines are coming up her body, or she could have Overdrive. But when she showed them, like, okay, if she has it, this means Jin has to have it. Sylph and Wise having it, I was like, like, Wise has got the save a little bit for me. I'm being a little bit biased towards that because his is probably my favorite design after Mishima had those big, weird back plug tendrils. I think those are really sick. But besides that, I wasn't a huge fan on him just dropping overdrives pretty much to end all the fights. Because they felt like how it was like when Shiki beat Orc, where it was like the moment he dropped overdrive, the fight ended. And that's essentially how it was with these other guys. Whereas, like, Laguna didn't need that. Laguna had this, Tears Wave, this big water attack. I thought the general fight dynamics that they were having was pretty cool, too. Like, when she has her string wrapped around his neck, and she's getting ready to behead him, and then he pretty much makes himself cry so he can use the effect of his ether ground himself to turn into water to avoid it. I thought that was pretty smart. Like, that's one of the benefits when you have characters that are, for the most part, just using very, like, much more grounded techniques and abilities, because then you're going to have opportunities like that for them to do some quick cheat mode. And it's not like they have, like, Drac and Joe. Like Drac and Joe would have been like, okay, doesn't really matter, you're still something I can manipulate, and you could, turn the water or something else. Where it's like, with Ijuna, it was more about, like, okay, yeah, she's going to use physical force to cut your head off. There was information in the chapter about her and Shura that is one of the big interesting aspects that I took away from this. And that's that she ended up using the red string of fate power that she's got, like, was it Red Destiny, to tie herself to Shura, so her and Shura, like, loved each other. And because of that, I believe at least that's how she survived. Like, Shura wasn't going to just torture her to death because now he had a strong affection for her. The thing about that has me worried, but also at the same time has a lot of my interest in Ijuna's following characteristic. I don't know, but I guess whatever her character route is going to be beyond this. Because once the red string is cut, all the love between the two characters turns into hate. So Shura should despise her next time he sees her. So I feel like the next moment that she steps foot anywhere where Shura's going to be, she's going to kill him. The only way that's not going to be the case is if the next time she runs into Shura is post-defeated by Shiki, and he's unable to fight back, and she either kills him or does some big dramatic end with his character, or some form of tie around with that. But in general, I thought the stuff with Laguna and her was pretty cool. I enjoyed it. like, it made me like Laguna a little bit more. I still think he's kind of sus, and I would like to get to a point where we actually can see his character and get a little bit more of information from his perspective to make me think, like, okay, yeah, I kind of trust this guy. But besides that, I don't know, he's a character that I know a lot of people like. Again, I don't dislike or really like Laguna a whole lot. I definitely, though, like I said, I like him a little bit more after this chapter. I thought this was a little bit more solid of like a whole bit for him, going off of like this whole stuff with like Ijuna, because it was, instead of trying to tie it to like make him more set with the main cast, it was bringing somebody from obviously his past that is completely cut off from the main cast entirely, and almost cut off from the major moving parts of this arc, because it was really just confined with Ijuna, and then I guess by adjacent proxy Shura. And any following stuff with Shura is going to really depend on what Machina has planned next for character. But besides that, we got a ton of look more towards like the stuff with Shiki and Shura. Shiki's obviously looking really pissed off. Like he's ready just to completely mutilate Shura. I did notice in the chapter, there's that point when they clash, and Shiki has like that dark gravity energy around his fist again. So is that going to be like another sign that he's falling further into the whole dark gravity that they were talking about? Because I really like the idea that Shiki is essentially an anti-villain. Because, you know, I mentioned a couple times in other videos, Haru, you know, Mishima's first main character from first serialized main character from Rave Master, he was more of a classic hero. Natsu is like a soft anti-hero where, I mean, he's fully willing to do anti-hero things. Like, he's fully willing to kill his opponents. He's not really fully like good aligned. He's inherently good, but the second anybody on the any side whatsoever, doesn't matter if they're good or bad, has any form of ill intent or aggression towards this guild, and he's ready to throw hands. Shiki, because of like his nature and where he's at in the story, he could easily be essentially like an anti-villain, where he's a good guy, sort of, but a bad guy at the same time, because the Eden Zero is going to be their own kind of thing, and they're obviously against, like, the whole interstellar union and whatnot. So if it's, like, Shiki is, like, a villain that acts nice regularly, not like an evil villain, but, like, from the mass populace, kind of like what I would assume Ziggy was like, because, I mean, he was called the Demon King. He looks like a bad guy even prior to this. We don't know exactly the full detail, but we know at one point he was, like, a much nicer guy. So he had to have something weird about like his story that at some point people started calling him like the Demon King and thinking him as like a villainous character, when we saw prior to him getting back up, like after the Belial Go arc, that he was like he was a much nicer person, and we don't know what exactly happened between those points and now that caused him to pretty much turn on all humanity and stuff. But the whole bit with the dark gravity has a lot of my interest for Shiki beyond this, and I was happy that Witch was alive. Like I said, I don't really like the thing about like if she was dead, I'd be bummed because she's been a character for a while, but we haven't had a lot from her that would give like way more insight onto like her as a character, like way more to kind of get attached to her. Like, she hasn't really had a whole lot of her own arc. We've had a little bit of stuff, like, after, like, Valkyrie's death between her and sister. But I would really like to get, like, essentially have an arc where she has a big role, like, a much more set focus. And has, like, a bunch of spotlight moments, or at least, like, one big spotlight moment. Kind of like if we are looking at this arc, or looking at relatively any other arc, I would put her more as almost like a second string character. Like, she's active in the arc, but she's not one of the main focus. I would like her to get like a main focus one, kind of like how Laguna is right now. Laguna's obviously like much more focused in the events right now than he was in any of the previous arcs. Or you can kind of look the same, I guess, not really at Jin for the Forester, because like he wasn't as focused. It was more of like information from his backstory and stuff. But you know what I mean, essentially. Like, she would end up getting a leading role in you know, whatever arc the story she was at before she ends up getting killed. Like, because generally when a character, if you're not going to have a whole lot of time to kind of like, you know, put them on display and stuff and then kill them, It's got to be through like relating to other characters and giving them information through like their backstory and insight to a character we do know, because then you can kind of like bridge the gap between the reader and this character with another character, pretty much. So that whole bit was like really cool. I can't wait to see what Shiki does. I fully expect him and Shura to both go overdrive, but it's like I wonder if Shiki's gonna get anything like his overdrive is gonna progress, because that will at least confirm my belief that the overdrives that the Ida Zero crew have aren't complete. Because like when you look at their forms versus Drac and Joe's overdrive was over his entire body, whereas the rest of pretty much every other overdrive we've seen is partial, like it's over parts of their arms, and it just doesn't cover nearly as much surface area as what what Drac and Joe did. Maybe we'll get to see more and get more information from like Nero, Jaguar, and Ziggy. I actually would Ziggy be able to do overdrive? I don't really know, because Jaguar and Nero definitely can, but Ziggy's different because he's a machine. I'd be very curious exactly as to if he could, because I can't think of any like raw robots doing overdrive. And obviously we haven't had lots of opportunities yet. Like the closest is Jin, but Jin is a cyborg and not a full robot. Other than that, there was that like little bit at the end where we're getting like information of Creed being from like his actual name Seiji Hojo, and he's from the Oedo planet, just like Homura is. I thought that was a weird thing to kind of throw in this, because it's like the immediate follow-up to Shura confronting, or like Shura revealing the damage he did to Witch, finding out Witch was alive. Shiki and Shura's like big clash now like actually fully starting, going over to primarily the Laguna versus Ijuna fight, stuff in their backstory and stuff. And then at the very end it gave us this with Creed, because like I don't really know where this piece would go for like the rest of this arc. Like what would we find out from Creed that would play into the current story? I don't really see anything. Like, it's just kind of a weird plot piece to kind of drop. It would just be like, hey, we've got all this stuff going on with the All Link and the Empires and all the Galactica and Interstellar, and then Victory comes up and he's like, just so you guys know, I have a PhD in I don't know, geology or something. And just be like, dude, why are you telling us? Like, it's a little bit more relevant considering we have Creed and Homura currently grouped up right now, but it's like, well, why do we need to know that? I mean, maybe it's something just Mishima's setting up for the future. Maybe we're going to get information on another Galactica, whoever is after Nero. But either way, I thought this was a pretty solid chapter. Like, it was good. I really enjoyed the dynamics of the fight between Ijuna and Laguna. I liked the reveal that she had used her ether gear on between her and Shura. I thought that was actually pretty clever, and it makes me really hyped up to see like what his follow-up is going to be with that, because we know that once the thread is broken, all the love between the two characters that formed, it turns into hate. And then the dark gravity stuff with Shiki is definitely a huge hype point for moving forward. And we should be getting Shura with Overdrive, I would assume, in this instance. Like, it would be weird if Mishima cuts this fight and then sets up for like round 3. I'm guessing this is going to be like the actual fight. And if Shura doesn't have Overdrive, I'm going to be, 1, really surprised, and 2, I'm going to say, well, he's screwed. Because Shiki wouldn't only have Overdrive, he has that whole Black Heaven, Black Sky ability that Xenolith taught him that he hasn't dropped yet. He hasn't revealed to like other characters and to the readers. I want to know what it is. Like, could it be like maybe he pulls in a bunch of debris from like around the planet? Like imagine he like just kind of like AoE pulls down like a meteor shower. That'd be really sick. I think that'd be badass. And it would I would imagine destroy the whole area. But actually, yeah, if it destroyed the whole area, then I'd be like, you're gonna be hurting potentially people in your own crew just from the sheer AoE. I don't really know. Like the whole name doesn't give doesn't really give much information to what exactly it is. Just like what Black Heaven, Black Sky. I think it would be cool if we got like a meteor strike, though. I think like a couple meteors. We don't have to have and before people say not an asteroid, it doesn't have to be like a world-ending event, but he could have like a couple meteors just kind of come down, because you can have like a meteor the size of like a fridge, and it's still gonna do like megatons of like TNT like power from just like the level of velocity it's gonna pick up in the kinetic energy. So we get something sick like that. And it would be a really cool way to end this fight, because we already have Meteor Breaker, So if we have another meteor attack from Shiki, it would definitely play into the whole theme of he's essentially attacking you from these big space calamities. But anyway, other than that, comment below, thumbs up the video, but from the like button, subscribe, and check out my other videos. From that, I appreciate everybody's already subscribed, and thank you all for listening. Bye.